Being emotionally attached to someone who keeps hurting you does not come from love, safety, or stability. It grows out of intensity, from unpredictability, from repeated cycles of reward and punishment that train the nervous system to cling tighter the more it suffers. This is what is known as a trauma bond. A trauma bond develops when affection and pain become intertwined. One moment you are lifted, appreciated, chosen. The next you are criticized, ignored, or left feeling emotionally isolated. The contrast is so sharp that your brain begins chasing the good moments with urgency. You are not truly chasing the person. You are chasing relief. You are chasing the return of warmth after feeling emotionally cold. The human mind is deeply wired for attachment. When connection feels threatened, the body reacts as if survival itself is at risk. Stress hormones rise, anxiety builds, and your thoughts loop endlessly. You replay conversations, search for meaning, and look for reassurance. When that reassurance finally appears, a message, a compliment, or even a brief moment of affection, it creates a rush. That rush strengthens the bond. Over time, the relationship stops being about connection or mutual respect. It turns into something driven by control. Your nervous system begins to rely on them to calm the very anxiety they create. That is why walking away feels so difficult. Not because you truly cannot live without them, but because your body has been conditioned to believe you cannot. Silence interrupts this conditioning. When you go no contact, no calls, no texts, no checking their activity, you remove both the pain and the relief. At first, this can feel even worse. Your body resists. It craves the familiar cycle. You may feel restless, obsessive, even uneasy in your own skin. Your mind may distort memories, making them seem better than they really were, while minimizing the harm. That is not proof the bond was healthy. It is proof it was powerful. Silence forces the nervous system to reset. Without constant emotional stimulation, without new highs and lows, the body slowly begins to settle. The absence of chaos feels unfamiliar at first. Quiet can feel empty when you are used to emotional intensity. But within that quiet, your mind starts to clear. You begin to remember things more accurately. You start noticing patterns you once ignored or excused. You see how often you changed yourself just to keep peace. You realize how many times your needs were overlooked. Distance creates clarity, and clarity weakens the illusion. The trauma bond depends on constant interaction. It needs ongoing engagement to survive. Every response feeds it. Every argument renews it. Even conversations meant for closure can strengthen it because they bring back emotional intensity. Silence removes the fuel. As days turn into weeks, something subtle begins to change. The urgency fades. The cravings become less sharp. Emotional highs and lows start to level out. What once felt like fate begins to look like something broken. The person you believed you could not live without becomes someone you can think about without feeling shaken. This process is not linear. There will be moments of weakness, times when loneliness disguises itself as love. But with consistent silence, the nervous system keeps moving toward balance. You begin to find validation within yourself instead of seeking it externally. Your sense of self, once distorted by constant emotional struggle, slowly starts to rebuild. The mind naturally moves toward healing. When removed from constant disruption, it seeks stability. Silence creates space for that healing. It allows suppressed emotions to surface and be processed instead of being quickly soothed by the same person who caused them. Grief replaces anxiety. And grief, unlike a trauma bond, flows through you instead of trapping you in place. The longer the silence continues, the weaker the mental connection becomes. Your brain stops associating that person with relief or safety. Emotional dependence loosens. What once felt magnetic begins to feel unnecessary in that stillness. The bond does not shatter all at once. It fades quietly, piece by piece as your system learns that safety does not come from chaos and attachment does not need to hurt. Control is often the hidden force in a dynamic with a narcissist. What appears on the surface as love, passion, or even conflict is often rooted in something far more psychological: the need to control perception. A narcissist does not just want connection, they want influence. They want to shape how you see them, how you see yourself, and how the story unfolds. Your reactions become their validation. When you argue, they feel significant. When you cry, they feel powerful. When you defend yourself, they feel superior. Even when you try to reason with them, you remain part of their system. Engagement confirms their importance. Silence removes that confirmation. At first, they may not react visibly. A narcissist often assumes silence is temporary, that you will eventually reach out, that your emotional dependence will draw you back. They are used to cycles: conflict followed by reconciliation, distance followed by return. They rely on your attachment being predictable. But when silence continues, it begins to unsettle them. Without your reactions, they lose emotional supply. Emotional supply is not just admiration. It includes anger, fear, jealousy, and longing. Any strong emotion directed at them keeps them feeling central. When that stops, it creates discomfort. It is not always that they miss you as a person. They miss the control they had over your emotional state. Control requires feedback, and silence provides none. Without your responses, their usual strategies lose effectiveness. They may try harder to regain your attention. Small messages, indirect signals, reminders of the past, or even displays of vulnerability. Each attempt is a test to see if access still exists. If silence continues, the shift deepens. The narcissistic personality often rests on fragile self-worth hidden beneath confidence. External validation supports that structure. When someone who once provided consistent attention completely withdraws, it creates instability. They may seek new sources of attention quickly. They may rewrite the narrative to make it seem like they chose to leave. These reactions are not random. They are attempts to restore internal balance. Silence removes the mirror they rely on. In many such relationships, the partner becomes that mirror, reacting, explaining, defending, and responding. That reflection reassures the narcissist of their importance. When it disappears, they are left facing their own inner reality, which is often uncomfortable. Control also thrives on unpredictability. By shifting between warmth and distance, they maintain psychological power. When you choose silence, you introduce new unpredictability. They cannot manage. There is no move to anticipate, no response to analyze. There is only absence, and absence cannot be controlled. As time passes without contact, their usual methods lose strength. Gaslighting requires dialogue. Love bombing requires access. Blame requires interaction. Without engagement, these tools become ineffective. Their influence fades from an active force into a distant memory. At the same time, silence transforms your internal state. While they may feel unsettled, you begin to feel steadier. The less you respond, the less they can affect you. The less they affect you, the less control they hold. Power in this situation is not loud or dramatic. It is the quiet decision not to participate. Over time, the imbalance becomes clear. The dynamic that once revolved around their emotions and timing begins to collapse. You are no longer reacting to late-night messages. You are no longer defending your identity. You are no longer defending your identity. You are no longer defending your identity. Longer searching for explanations to contradictions. They may interpret this as rejection, indifference, or disrespect. What unsettles them most is not anger. It is irrelevance. Being ignored challenges their belief that they are essential. It disrupts the idea that they can return whenever they choose. Silence communicates something difficult for them to accept. That access is no longer guaranteed. That influence is no longer automatic. That control has limits. When control weakens, the structure built around it begins to fall apart. In relationships with a narcissist, confusion is rarely accidental. It is carefully created through mixed signals, shifting narratives, and emotional inconsistency. This creates mental fog. When you are constantly reacting, defending, explaining, or hoping, your perspective becomes distorted. You are too close to the situation to see it clearly. Staying involved keeps you inside the illusion. Silence places you outside of it. When you stop responding, something subtle yet profound begins to happen. The emotional noise fades without constant interaction. You no longer spend your time analyzing their last message or recovering from their last withdrawal. Your energy is no longer tied to their unpredictability. Space begins to open, and within that space, clarity grows stronger. You begin to see not just what happened, but how it affected you. You start to reconnect with parts of yourself that were pushed aside. And slowly, without force, without drama, the hold they once had over you begins to dissolve. Your mind, no longer under constant pressure, begins to observe instead of immediately react. Observing shifts everything. When you are actively engaged, a narcissist can control how they present themselves in real time. They can appear charming, redirect blame, distort facts, or twist situations. If you confront them, they shift direction. If you expose something, they explain it away. Conversation gives them material to manipulate, but silence removes the stage. There is no audience to persuade, no instant reaction to overpower. Without your involvement, their behavior becomes easier to recognize in its raw state. Patterns that once felt confusing begin to look obvious. You start noticing how apologies rarely carried genuine accountability, how promises sounded strong but faded quickly, how affection often appeared when you were pulling away. Distance highlights repetition, and repetition reveals what is truly happening. Silence also uncovers what they actually want. When you stop reaching out, their attempts to reconnect say a lot. Do they show real care, or do they use guilt, memories, or subtle pressure? Do they respect your space, or do they push harder when ignored? Their reaction to your absence often speaks louder than anything they said while present. Respect expresses itself quietly, while entitlement makes itself known loudly. Without the emotional intensity of direct contact, you begin to see how often conversations were redirected toward their needs, how often your emotions were sidelined, how arguments repeatedly shifted focus onto your flaws instead of their actions. Distance allows memories to reorganize without distortion. The mind has a way of restoring truth when it is no longer being challenged in the moment. Silence reveals another layer as well, how they respond to losing access. In healthy attachment, distance may bring sadness, but it does not lead to manipulation or games. In narcissistic patterns, losing access often triggers attempts to regain control, spreading rumors, sudden displays of success, carefully timed vulnerability. These behaviors are not random. They often stem from a wounded ego. When you are no longer there to reinforce their self-image, they are left to face their inner instability. You also begin to see who they are outside of the version you imagined in the relationship. Hope often filled the gaps. You saw potential where there was inconsistency.